Right, good afternoon. I'm Nat Sakimura, one of the main authors of the OpenID Connect, and I'm actually going to talk about self-sovereign identity in a very different setting than most people actually talks about self-sovereign thing. So, you might feel funny that I actually put OpenID Connect there in conjunction with self-sovereign, right? Because OpenID Connect is often associated with user-centric. Oh, by the way, do you know what is OpenID Connect? No. All right, so who think the OpenID Connect is user-centric? Okay, a couple of people. And who think OpenID Connect is self-sovereign? Nobody. Almost. Actually, all the answers is right, because the question itself is malformed. OpenID Connect is actually a protocol. Right? It's only a protocol, and it can be deployed in various deployment patterns, such as social and bank identities, in which case it results in user-centric identity. While it can also be deployed on your own, on-premise or on cloud. I actually have been running my own IDP since 2011 on OpenID Connect. There's only one user, me. Right? And it's pretty much self-sovereign. I actually, when you talk about self-sovereign, you have to also run various things. Like I'm running my own mail server, which is sometimes misconfigured. That my slide actually didn't reach Andy. And then I run my own cloud file service using Nextcloud. But it's kind of hard way, although it doesn't cost too much, right? My cloud server actually runs on $10 per month instance, and everything is just OpenID Connect, so it actually works, except that almost nobody accepts it, right? Which is a big problem, but protocol-wise, it's standard OpenID Connect, so it should work. There's another easier way. Everybody has mobile phone, right? And if you can run your own identity provider on your phone, it's going to be much easier. So that I put self-sovereign easier way. But in this case, you need to have some specialized changes to the protocol, because the relying party actually can't reach proactively to the identity provider. So in OpenID Connect, we have something called self-issued OpenID provider. It's on the chapter 7 of the OpenID Connect specification, and you can read it. But with that kind of small change, you can actually deploy your IDP on your phone or on your local machine. Now, OpenID Connect is often said to be authentication, but it isn't. What OpenID Connect is a user consent-based selective attribute disclosure protocol. If you read the specification, it says obtaining the subject's consent is a must, right? And then it allows requesting granular claims using claims parameter. You can do profiles and other scopes. That's alias to more granular scopes and granular claim request. And then claims can come from other sources than IDP itself as signed tokens. It's actually defined in chapter 6, I think, of the OpenID Connect standard. Then the identifier for the user can be ephemeral or pseudonymous, depending on how you want. Of course, I just found out that I was pointed out a couple of weeks ago that it's actually really difficult to read it like that, and that's editorial mistakes. But from the beginning of the OpenID Connect journey, we were always thinking about ephemeral identifiers, so that ID token can actually be used as the mechanism for anonymous attribute-based authentication. All right. There are 4 actors in OpenID Connect. Me in the center, right? That's the most important entity, but there are others like IDP. And I put OP and SIOP there. OP stands for OpenID Provider. SIOP stands for Self-issued OpenID Provider. OpenID Provider is on your phone. Then number 4 is relying party. That's the standard stuff. But you might not have heard about Claims Provider. It's less used part of the OpenID Connect specification. And Claims Provider actually can provide signed claims to the IDP to be related to the relying party. And it consists of 3 parts. authorization server, identity server, and the resource server or resource endpoint that can serve signed claims. It's actually another form of IDP, really. So IDP requesting another IDP to provide sort of ID token and bring it back. Right, so now I have set the ground. I'm going to dive into to-do list for SIOP. There are 6 things that need to be tightened up. The number 1 is registration of the SIOP to the claims provider so that OP can request signed claims to the claims provider. Right? I'm going to talk about that. And then the second thing I'm going to talk about that is binding the self-issued identifier. In the case of self-issued OpenID provider, the user identifier is actually a hash of the public key. And you need to bind that to the claims so that the receiver of the attested claims can actually relate that claims to the user who's logging in with the self-issued identity provider or self-sovereign OP. And then attesting the signing key from the past is another issue. Even if I got the credential or I got qualification from a school, something like that, 20 years ago, and then that school has gone away, I still want to present that I am actually a graduate of that school. And for that, there has to be key store that can be publicly shared that can attest that the signing key that was used to sign my certificate is the proper key at that time. Then 4th point is the enabling the key recovery. The users are notoriously bad at keeping the key safe and keeping track of it, so we need to have that. And then the 5th point is providing the claims to the relying party when the SIOP is offline. That's another problem. And then the last point is finding the SIOP address. So I'm going to spend like 3 minutes each on that. Okay, registration of OP to CP. This is confusing because there are 2 OPs, right? But in this case, I'm calling the one in the center, that one, as OP. In this setting, the OP actually acts as the clients to the claims provider, which is another OP, right? And you can actually use the regular dynamic client registration onto the claims provider. That's not a problem. And then second problem is binding user identifier at the OP and the attested claims. So this guy maintains its own user identifier. And the claims provider maintains its own user identifier as well. And when claims provider is providing the claims, since this guy is providing that thing to this relying party with the user identifier, which is registered here, the self-issued identifier. So I need to be able to ask the claims provider to use that user ID combined with this access token, which was obtained from the previous relationship, and have the claims signed with this UID back to me, so that I can provide that signed token or signed claims to the relying party. That relying party can actually rate that claims to me. So that's one of the things which we have to define. And there's no protocol defined for that. So to be really interoperable, we have to actually write up the specification for that. So that's the second to-do thing. Third to-do thing is attesting the signing key from the past. Like I said before, the claims provider can go out of business, right, in 2039, that this organization might not be there anymore. Even then, I might want to be able to present the claims or claim sets that's been signed back in 2019, something like that. In that case, I need to prove that this key was actually a valid one. And for that, we could use some kind of publicly run shared key store, which is time-stamped, right? One way to do it is using blockchain, obviously. Another way is to use other kind of the time-stamping service. This one is about the key rotation. So the claims provider might want to rotate the key. In that case, the claims provider can sign the new key with the old key and write it in the public registry, and that's the standard stuff. Right. And then enabling key recovery. There are two approaches that I would like to propose on this one. The first approach is to duplicate many times and store many. Typically, my key is represented in JWKS, JSON Web Key Set. Then you can transform it with all or nothing transform. All or nothing transform, AONT, is the kind of transform that if you don't have all the fragments, right? So I've split into two here. You won't be able to recover anything. So you can split it into the big portion and the small portion. For the big portion, you can store it on any of the public, or, the cloud storage like Dropbox or Google or wherever. They will never be able to recover anything from it, any bits from it. And I'll store the smaller bits into the safer places, like store it in a USB key and store it in my storage, or perhaps I can entrust that to the trust bank or something like that, TPP. If I lose track of those keys, I can always come back to these and combine them personally and recover my keys. If that fails, then there's a second option. In case the trusted third party or trust TPP can assist the re-identification of me. A trusted party can be in a group of friends, or it can be other parties like information fiduciary type of party. And I can create a new key and combine with my old key, and they can sign it over with their credentials so that other people can actually trust this key rotation, so that I can recover my own account there. So that's how to enable the key recovery and key rotation. And then providing the claims to the relying party when the SIOP is offline is possible using something called distributed claims in OpenID Connect. It's also in the Chapter 7 of OpenID Connect. Now, I've put beware of privacy implications box here, because in this case, the claims provider is not communicating with the relying party directly, so that claims provider will not know where I'm presenting the credential. In this case, the relying party is obtaining the tokens directly from the claims provider, which means the claims provider can actually find out where I'm presenting that token. So some of the privacy protection feature is gone. But so you have to balance the utility that you can actually provide the claims without your intervention and the loss of privacy down there. And the last to the thing is how to streamline the process of finding SIOP. Now, in OpenID Connect, we are proposing to use OpenID scheme, OpenID : / for the SIOP as an app. But that doesn't actually work for other kind of implementations. Like you could implement SIOP as progressive web app. Kim Cameron is actually doing that right now. But for that, the custom scheme like OpenID : / doesn't work. It needs to give a deep link into it. So in this kind of case, you actually need to provide a domain at least. And the most popular way right now for that is to use a NASCAR. But in case of self-sovereign thing, there are going to be too many of them, so it actually doesn't work. You could actually use WebFinger to do the IDP discovery for that, but it proved to be not so popular, right? So what Kim is actually proposing is the browser setting plus request header, so that you can set the header string to the browser, so that the browser can actually give out which IDP you are actually using, so that the relying party can find out where to redirect the user to get him authenticated and get the claims attributes. So that's what he's proposing, and I agree that that probably is a good idea to do. Although we have to get the buy-in from the browser vendors, right? And hoping that he's still working for the Microsoft, right? And he can persuade the Chromium people to do that. Then we might get there. But that's going to improve the usability substantially. So that's what I'm hoping for. Right. So that's my main slides. I've got 4 minutes. If you have any questions, I've got many backup slides, by the way, so I can always jump around and answer your questions. Well, this slide deck has like 70 slides, and I've only used 18 of them. So any questions? Yes.
So while a self-issued OP is part of the core spec, what's the support for RP libraries and being able to handle this?
So it's primarily just the OpenID Connect, right? Mm-hmm. With a little bit of a twist. For example, if this is the biggest portion, you have to be able to find the OP, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and then so that's a part that they have to actually implement. Okay. And if we go this way, it's going to be pretty much a regular OP, so that would be pretty good. But except for one thing, I didn't dig deep onto this, and I just skipped through. But dynamic client registration, that's actually not very popular right now. But you have to actually have this capability for the client to actually make use of it. Okay. Any other questions? Right. So one of the main points about proposing something like this is that I have always been the supporter of self-sovereign kind of things, because my credo was to get the identity back to the users or power to the people. But I'm actually a little bit skeptical if we need a completely new protocol to achieve it. What I'm presenting here to you is that you can actually reuse most of OpenID Connect. With only a little bit of tweak, you can actually achieve what self-sovereign identity is trying to do. And I think that's a much easier path to get buy-in from the running parties, because they don't need to change anything, almost. Yeah?
Tacky question. But if the subject is the hash or fingerprint of the public key, and then I want to rotate the key of my self-issued OpenID provider, then I'm going to appear as a new user at the relying party. Mm-hmm. So is that the right value to use for subject?
It's just like changing your identity provider or something like that, right? So you could actually roll over the user identifier.
Right, but yes, but then the relying parties have to be ready to basically get some message that says, my old identifier was this, and my new identifier is that, but it's the same person.
That's right, that's right. And it's much like when we roll over from OpenID 2 to OpenID Connect. You always need something like that, yeah.
Well, right, but that was sort of like a one-time thing.
Yeah, but now you have to do it, consistently. Yeah.
Capability that relying parties would have to implement.
Right. But that can be a privacy feature as well. You can tell to some relying party that I have actually rotated my key, and for others, you don't tell. Then they will not be able to track me anymore. Yeah, there's pros and cons to that. But the way to do is that so I didn't actually explain it, but you start off with the initial key 01, and then when you rotate the key, you create the document combining key 01, key 02, and sign it with the key 01.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I've got 15 seconds. All right, thank you very much.